Today we're unpacking one of the biggest updates in Australian first home buyer landscape, the 24-25 First Home Guarantee Scheme report. You've probably seen a lot of headlines, opinions, and even myths floating around about this scheme lately. So in this episode, I want to break down what the data from that report actually says, clear up some common misconceptions, and share what the latest report reveals about how first home buyers are really using the scheme in today's market. Hello, and welcome to First Home Unlocked, the podcast for unlocking clarity and confidence for first home buyers. I'm Jack Elliott, National First Home Buyer Specialist at Alcove.
And I'm Chris Bates, ex-financial planner and mortgage broker.
Together, we are on a mission to empower you with the keys to unlock your first home. Let's jump in. Hello, welcome back to First Home Unlocked. Today, we're unpacking one of the biggest updates in Australian first home buyer landscape, the 24-25 First Home Guarantee Scheme report. You've probably seen a lot of headlines, opinions, and even myths floating around about this scheme lately. So in this episode, I want to break down what the data from that report actually says, clear up some common misconceptions, and share what the latest report reveals about how first home buyers are really using the scheme in today's market. We'll also talk about the most common misconceptions about the First Home Guarantee, the real numbers from the 24-25 report, what the data shows about risks, missed repayments, and long-term outcomes, and what it really takes to buy under the scheme, including the full upfront costs beyond the 5% loan deposit. So this episode continues the conversation from episode 10, Unlocking the First Home Guarantee Scheme. In that episode, we did a deeper dive into how the scheme works, including the eligibility, the pros and the cons, and how to eventually exit the scheme. So if you haven't already listened, I recommend jumping into that episode first. So let's start with a quick refresher. What is the First Home Guarantee? Well, it's a federal government initiative run by Housing Australia that helps eligible first home buyers purchase a property with as little as a 5% deposit without paying lenders' mortgage insurance. The government acts as a guarantor, telling the bank to treat you as if you had a full 20% deposit. You still own 100% of your home. The guarantee just helps you get into the market sooner with a smaller deposit and lower upfront costs. All right, let's start with a common misconception I'm seeing and hearing around the scheme. People think the First Home Guarantee is a brand new scheme that's launched this year, referring to it as the new First Home Buyer Scheme. And I get why people may be confused. There were some big changes that took place from October 2025, including the removal of income caps so that more first home buyers can now access the scheme, increased property price caps across Australia, and the removal of place limits when using the scheme. But the scheme itself isn't new. It was actually introduced back in 2020, originally called the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme, under the Liberal and Coalition government. It's since evolved under Housing Australia, with the name being updated to the First Home Guarantee Scheme in 2022, and has continued helping Australians into their first home for nearly 6 years now. In fact, since 2020, the scheme has helped support over 230,000 Australians into home ownership, including 45,000 plus key workers like teachers, nurses, and emergency service personnel, 79,000 regional buyers, and 5,000 plus single women with dependents. Now, that's a huge impact, and it's now become a core part of the Australian first home buyer landscape. From the new report for the 2024-25 financial year, more than 1 in 3 first home buyers nationally used the scheme, with 92% of all available places taken up from the last financial year. So this isn't a new scheme at all. It's been running successfully for years, helping thousands of Australians buy their first home sooner. We might have also seen or heard people say the First Home Guarantee is a Labor government initiative. But the truth is, the scheme has had bipartisan support from the start, meaning both major political parties have backed it regardless of who's in government. So for the 2025 election, both Labor and the Coalition put forward policies that included versions of the same scheme, although with different eligibility criteria. So that means no matter who forms government, there has been consistent support for helping first home buyers enter the market with a smaller deposit and avoid paying lenders' mortgage insurance. Both major parties recognise that the scheme is working, and the data from this year's report backs that up, showing continued strong performance, low arrears, and steady demand right across Australia. Now, there has also been a few headlines or comments suggesting that because the scheme allows buyers to purchase with a 5% deposit and maximising their loan to 95% loan to value ratio is leading to a rise in defaults or arrears, which are missed repayments. But the data actually tells a different story. As of June 2025, arrears on the first home guarantee loans were sitting at just 0.3%, with hardship cases at 0.9%. So the arrears rate is well below the national average arrears rate of around 0.89%. That means borrowers under the scheme are actually performing better than the wider market, even through a tough couple of years with higher interest rates and costs of living pressure. So rather than being a sign of risk, the data shows that the majority of buyers under the scheme are managing their loans responsibly and making their repayments better than the market average. Now, we have just talked about maxing out your loan at 95% loan to value ratio, and I do want to acknowledge the risk of using the scheme because borrowing at that 95% isn't without its challenges. Yes, the scheme removes lenders' mortgage insurance, but it doesn't remove the responsibility. You're still borrowing a large amount with less initial equity, which means if the market dips or if your income changes, you have less flexibility to draw equity or refinance quickly. So that's why we always encourage having buffers in place. Things like a dedicated emergency fund, income protection or your relevant insurances, and a clear plan for how much you need to feel secure if something unexpected happened. For some people, their emergency fund might cover 3 to 6 months of mortgage repayments, for example. For others, they might want to cover their total living expenses, not just the mortgage repayments. And then for others, a set dollar figure like $10,000, $20,000 or more in the bank is what makes them feel comfortable at night. So with this, there's no one size that fits all number. It's about what lets you sleep well at night. And I would encourage you to work out what you need for your situation. If you're going to take on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, protecting yourself with strong buffers and a clear plan is crucial when using the scheme. Now, let's talk about another big misconception that's under the first home guarantee. You only need a 5% deposit. It's true that the scheme allows you to borrow with just a 5% loan deposit, but that's not all you'll need to save for and spend when you purchase your first home. There are other upfront costs you'll need to cover, including stamp duty costs, conveyancer and legal fees, building and pest inspections, bank and government fees, building insurance, your moving costs, and your cash buffer or emergency fund like we just spoke about. Now, we covered this in episode 3, Unlocking the Real Costs of Buying Your First Home, so check that out if you haven't already. So while the scheme makes it easier to buy with a smaller loan deposit, you still need to plan for these other upfront costs. We've broken down a few examples of the real upfront costs on our social media channels, but I wanted to bring an example to the podcast platform as well. So let's say you're buying a property for $900,000 in Queensland. Your 5% deposit will be $45,000. But once you add in all the other upfront costs like stamp duty, $26,350, transfer fee, $3,457, your mortgage registration fee of $238, conveyancer fee, $2,500, your lender fees of $1,000, building and pest inspection, $600, your building insurance of $3,000, moving costs of $3,500, and your furniture and setup costs, let's estimate $5,000, but this can vary significantly depending on your situation, and a cash buffer of around $20,000. Your total cash required jumps to around $110,000, more than double your initial 5% deposit. And that really highlights the importance of planning your first home purchase with realistic expectations. This does vary by your location and purchase price because stamp duty is different in each state, and stamp duty is usually one of the biggest costs after the loan deposit. Even with a scheme like this, the goal is to buy confidently and sustainably, not stretch yourself too thin. So why it's called the 5% deposit scheme? In reality, you'll likely need to save a higher percentage of the purchase price once you factor in all the other upfront costs. And that's why planning early and getting the right advice makes such a difference. And don't forget, we're more than happy to have a chat and help you plan even if you aren't ready to buy yet. So what does the 2024-25 financial year report actually reveal? Let's run through some of the key numbers together. Around 46,000 of the 50,000 available places were taken up this year. So that's 92%, up from 5% on the year before, showing the increased demand in using the scheme. 61,281 home buyers were supported in total for the financial year. The scheme now supports at least 1 in every 3 first home buyers in 6 of the 8 states and territories. Over 1 in 4 guarantees issued supported key workers to purchase their homes. And since the scheme commenced, more than 34,000 households, 22% of the participants, have exited the scheme. Now that's important because it shows the scheme is working as a stepping stone. On average, buyers are exiting the scheme after 29 months. Most discharges, around 58%, occurred when borrowers repaid their loan-to-value ratio below the 80% or refinanced using the equity accumulated under the scheme. Even with the higher interest rates experienced earlier last financial year, participation actually rose when using the scheme, while the broader first homebuyer activity in the housing market slowed. So this shows, despite the tougher lending and buying conditions, first homebuyers are still using this scheme strategically to stay competitive and get into the market sooner. So the key takeaway from all this is that the first home guarantee scheme is a tool. And like any tool, it works best when it's used well with the right structure and strategy behind it. If you're thinking about using the scheme, make sure you're understanding all your costs, not just your deposit. Keep buffers in place to protect yourself and make sure that the property you're buying still meets your asset quality and long-term goals, which we've covered in episode 1 and episode 6 of the podcast. So it's not just about buying fast, it's about buying right for you now and your future. So to recap, here's what the 24-25 report tells us. The scheme isn't new, it's been supporting Australian first home buyers since 2020. It's had bipartisan support with both major political parties backing it. It's stable. Arrears remain at just 0.3% below the industry averages. And it's helping more than 1 in 3 first home buyers having used it. So if you want to learn how to use the scheme strategically or see if it fits into your plan, you can book a get to know you chat at firsthomeunlocked.com.au/book or use the link in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode of First Home Unlocked. It's very exciting as Chris will be back in the studio. So really looking forward to that, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening. We'd really appreciate if you could do us a huge favour. Share this episode with any first home buyers that you know so we can help more people like you feel clear, calm and confident when purchasing their first property. You can join our Facebook group, First Home Unlocked, to continue the conversation with other first home buyers. Or if you're ready to unlock your first home, you can book a get to know you chat by using the link in the show notes or by going to firsthomeunlocked.com.au. Before we go, just a reminder that everything we share on this podcast is general in nature and not tailored to your personal situation. We always recommend seeking advice from a qualified and experienced professional when making financial decisions.